Okay, good afternoon and welcome back. And thank you for joining us. So we have a really exciting topic now. So the topic here is introducing emotion sensing glasses for distraction-free, personalized, augmented reality expressions from Dr. Charles Nduka, who's the co-founder and chief scientist at MTech. Charles graduated from Oxford University and Imperial College and is a plastic and reconstructive surgeon as well. He has multiple granted patents on emotion sensing from facial expressions and maintains an active research interest, particularly in facial expressions and rehabilitation. He is passionate about the potential of technology to improve lives and co-founded an emotion sensing company, MTech Labs, which creates biosensing VR headsets. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Charles Nduka.
Thanks very much. So you'll be wondering what the hell is a plastic surgeon doing talking about augmented reality glasses. Hopefully it'll make sense in due course. I'm going to be talking today about, change the slide please. About some of the requirements for AR glasses that are being discussed in the industry, that are being made clear with implementations. I'll talk about what we mean about user experience, certainly how I interpret it. I'll be talking about what is the core of personalization, a buzzword now that's across the whole industry, both for healthcare and for entertainment. And I'm going to do a crazy and risky thing, which is a live demo as well of our technology. So this is Michael Abrash. He's the chief scientist at now Meta, at Reality Labs. And he gives some fantastic overviews of the core requirements of technology, particularly around AR. And these are the main things that he talks about. You want something that's always available, intuitive, reliable, private, personalized, proactive, and elusive presence. I'm going to focus on two of those things and how they relate to what I see as a really key part of why AR is very different from the previous computing platform of smartphones and what's needed to ensure that end users have a good experience. So this first thing around always available. Many of you will have seen this video clip. This is Hyper Reality. It's on Vimeo. It's very funny. It's a whole scenario around this idea of the world painted in data. And what a dystopian nightmare it would be if you had these sort of things in your field of view the whole time. But even more reasonable discussions or representations around AR still to have a legacy from the old paradigm of the smartphone. Clearly, there's a problem here by having two different things and two different lenses. You have to have a split brain for that. But more seriously, our brain's primary role is to survive. And to do that, you have to filter out a lot of information. The bandwidth for the brain and for the attention centers is really quite narrow. We take in something like 11 megabits of data per second. And that has to be filtered down to about 50 bits per second, 50 bits per second. And so the brain's primary task is to get rid of all that noise, which comes from obviously your visual system, but also from your hearing, from your touch, from your taste, from your smell. Because without that, it becomes very difficult. And people have accidents, people have poor outcomes. And there's more and more research being done to understand the role that attention plays and how the body has to actually down-regulate and downplay certain senses to allow you to attend to other senses as well. And so whilst in the current paradigm of smartphones, yes, you can have something you hold in your hand where you can manipulate it, and it's fine, but it's very different when it's something that you're going to be immersed in. A smartphone, it's in your pocket, or it's in your bag, or it's on the table. But if it's something that's on your face all the time, you don't want information there because it's going to cause you to either be distracted, or confused, or frustrated. These are all emotion words. Or it's going to cause you to actually ignore them. And that's even worse, potentially, if you're using it for high-stakes scenarios such as training or education. And so one of the big exciting areas around AR is its use for entertainment, and companies such as Snap, companies such as Niantic are really capitalizing on this power of augmented experiences to enrich our lives through both snackable moments, entertainment, education, and training. Another element that Michael Abrash talks about is the importance of interfaces being intuitive. We talk about this word a lot, but what do we mean by intuitive? Well, what we mean is something that you haven't had to learn, something that you're born with, something that's innate. And there are very few things more innate. Well, where would you find things that remain innate? In babies. And when you look at the baby and its response to its first time trying something that's sour, look at that. It's natural. It frowns. We're talking about user interface, but the face actually is an interface to the brain to tell you how you've responded to what you've experienced. And we're unique as a species because we are the only species with this rather soft, generally hairless, flexible face to communicate to our caregivers about how we're feeling. Without that, we wouldn't survive. I love the micro-expression here. You see the eyebrow flash. These things are automatic. They occur in milliseconds. The brain is connected to the face via nerves that don't go via the spinal cord. And these are the key ways that we both experience the world, actually tell ourselves how we're feeling about the world, and also communicate to others and develop empathy. Even those who are supposed to be emotionless sometimes can express emotions. So my work as a plastic surgeon is around facial reconstruction for facial paralysis, and we used to use a technology called surface EMG using a box of a system over here to measure muscle activities in the skin and to enable patients to relearn how to downregulate the muscles and to rebalance their facial expressions and to smile. You know, we take a smile for granted. It's something that we do all the time. But if you're unable to smile for whatever reason, it becomes a real problem for you. Patients develop anxiety. They become socially anxious. They may become depressed. It's also a problem for people with autism, where you're not able to recognize perhaps other people's emotional responses. And therefore, empathy becomes difficult. And again, isolation, anxiety, and sadly, quite commonly, suicide, its consequence. And so 5 years ago, we founded a company to try to develop technology to allow people to have better feedback, to relearn expressions. And this was an early prototype of our system using EMG. EMG, when I first founded the company, was not spoken about a lot, but obviously Facebook have made that technology very famous. This is our early prototype, which is for patients with facial paralysis. It's Bluetooth connected to an app to give direct feedback around what the muscles are doing, to actually help you to learn. Because any of you just try this now, just try and raise one eyebrow and then the other one. It's actually really, really difficult because your face isn't designed for you. It's designed to move other people. Now, we realized that this technology was going to be too expensive for this relatively narrow niche of people. And so we went back again and thought, well, how can we make it more applicable? Hence the development of this, which is MTech Pro, a system of EMG-enabled VR, which is currently being used by a number of researchers now and content creators to understand how people respond to content. We have a vision for using this for facial rehabilitation, for patients to learn how to smile in very safe spaces of VR to allow them to interact with the world. Now, smiling is really important, as I said before, and we think we understand what a smile is. Some companies are using cameras on the bottom of their headsets to try to measure smiles, to infer emotions. But is that really going to work? I ask you. Look at these pictures. Nice smiling faces, yes? Different smiles. Or are they? You see, we spend about 80% of our time when we're interacting looking in the area around the eyes because that's what communicates the most important parts of our interactions. A smile is very easy to fake because we have voluntary control over these muscles. Obviously, you can measure automatic smiles, hence by using technology such as EMG. But it's really important to recognize that the area around the eyes is what gives meaning to our interactions. You can see, you can cover the mouth up, you can get rid of the mouth expressions, but you can see straight away when a person's feeling pain or anguish. This is from a study that was looking at pain responses. And so we see the role of emotion sensing going across a whole range of industries, from first responders in enterprise use cases, for wellness and healthcare, for training, to understand when people are feeling stressed or confused or frustrated, and also for developing new treatments. There's another element around the use of facial expressions, which is around its output mode. So we've been talking about input of experiences and outputting a response, but also you do have some ability to make voluntary expressions. This is another image from Michael Abrash's presentation, which is around the use of AR glasses to capture those special moments in our daily lives. And here's a clip from the launch of their glasses. One thing you'll notice when she takes a photograph is, well, you'll see just now. Now, if you want a technology that's intuitive, you don't want to be using your hands, do you? How do you capture an image when you're on a motorbike or operating machinery or some such thing? When you interact with the world, you sense what you're experiencing through your ears, through your eyes, and those signals go straight to your emotional centers of the brain. And then they travel from there via the facial nerves to the muscles at a very short distance with a very short latency. Signals then, once you've determined whether that thing is positive or negative, called valence, it travels to your limb to make an action. And so if you're going to use hand-based interaction, that's fine, but you have to accept there's a trade-off there in terms of latency. You're asking someone to spend more energy and more time doing something than could be achieved by relying on more intuitive responses. So the reaction time is going to be measured in orders of magnitude longer than using facial expressions. But also you can use expressions to capture images, to capture moments using emotional responses. And so this world that's going to be painted with data, you don't want to have things that are confusing or frustrating or agitating. That does not make for a good user experience. That doesn't engender positive emotions. So the last point I want to discuss around this concept of the ideal AR interface is around personalization. What do we mean by personalization? We talk about this term, personalized experience. What does it mean, personalization? Well, it means about your identity, who you are. It's also about what you're doing, where you are in context, the activities you're doing right now, how you yourself respond to what you're experiencing, and what's motivating those responses. Let's go through these one by one. Identity. One of the things that we've done, we have a patented system for measuring biometric response to the individual. One of the first things that Apple did when they launched the iPhone was to have the iPhone have obviously a passcode, and then later on they had the Face ID, and after the Touch ID. But obviously you can use the facial expressions, which are unique to all of us, not only the shape and morphology, but also the way it moves to identify the individual. And this will be a future way of ensuring your glasses are collecting data just for you and accessible only to you. Context. This is obviously very key. You want to have the information displayed at the time when you need it. If you're reading, you may want to maybe turn up the lights. Well, when it's dark, what do? You might squint your eyes. You can use expressions to drive other devices' interactions. Activity recognition. Now, this isn't using our sort of core sensors, but it's using algorithms we've developed for recognizing activities. So when a person's walking, this is the simple stuff, just using machine learning on the IMU. And then unique responses. one of the big problems in the whole industry of both psychology and consumer research is this assumption that people all respond the same way. There was some pioneering work that's now been maybe slightly discredited by Dr. Paul Ekman around emotions. And this used a categorical model, which assumed that everyone responds in the same way, and you only have these core emotions, the core emotions model. It's now recognized that a much better way of modeling emotions is what's called a dimensional model, which is using, rather than a sort of categorical way, but a linear scale of so-called valence and activation or arousal. And obviously, everyone expresses differently. So it's important to recognize that you can't put everyone in the same box. A person may be smiling not necessarily out of positivity, it could be out of embarrassment. And again, that's why it's important to personalize data. And then the motivations as well. If you're going to be able to put information out into the world, you want to make sure that it's only needed when the person needs it. So, for example, navigation advice, you need it when the person's feeling lost and confused. You may want to put information around, or you may want to guide information about where to go based on how positive a person had an experience in a location. These are the kinds of ways in which we will not paint the world of data, but have it much more stylized. So here we go. I take my life in my own hands now. I'll do a quick demo of our glasses. They look kind of funky right now because they're still a prototype. They will be smaller, believe me. Let's see how we go. So you can't really see me so well, so watch me really closely. I'm going to do some really tiny expressions while I'm talking now so you can see my activities. There's a bit of latency here because it's transmitting the data by Bluetooth, but I can smile. Raise my eyebrows. And what's nice is that it allows you to do things such as measure responses to content. So we have a platform here where I can show videos and allow a person to watch the video. Obviously, I've seen these many times, so I'm not going to respond naturally to them, but at least it allows you to just see how the platform can work for content analytics, so if you're making content. So I'm going to respond in the way you respond. Yeah, that one always gets a response. So you can see, I'm not sure you can see it so well on the screen, the moments within the screen, as they happen, become mapped to the experience. So this allows you to detect both events and the emotional content, i.e. positive or negative, in real time. There you go, well, at least it worked. Thank goodness for that. Back to my own glasses. And so the future of interaction is clearly coming. It's going to allow us to work smarter without confusion or frustration. It's going to allow us to learn new things and get information when we need it. It's going to allow us to have playful experiences. It's going to have better recommendations about what you like and what you don't like. So you don't spend, like me, 20 minutes searching through Netflix. It's going to enable these platforms such as Snapchat, to optimize to our experience. We've seen how TikTok has been amazingly successful by having a learning algorithm that is tailored to you. Just imagine an AR world where your decisions about whether you go from A to B via the shortest route or by the most joyous route is adapted to you and your mood at that time. Selections about what to eat, who to interact with, all these things that can improve and fulfill our lives. I'm running out of time now, but I'll just thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. We have time for a few questions here. Let's start with you, Jenna first.
That was really great. And congratulations on getting your demo to work. I think this is the only one I've seen work on the first try, so hats off for that. Exactly. So I have a question that is really just like, I want to just hear you're thinking about it. One of the things that makes TikTok really successful is that it is a behavior predictor, right? So TikTok, you're watching something, and then if you watch it, then you watch more things like that.
Yeah.
And I think you really astutely mentioned at the beginning of this talk that we have, our facial expressions are for others. And so I wonder about that use case of like, I'm smiling for it, or, you know, the sort of like facial activation as a way to make recommendations.
Yeah.
Given that emotional expressions on the face are generally very other focused or very socialized.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good point. So one thing to distinguish is that we have two modes of activation of facial expression. We have voluntary mode and the spontaneous mode. And they actually have two different neural correlates, neural centers. And there is actually an asymmetry in the facial balance when you do those things. And that's our core IP is around that. Because you can use the things that happen spontaneously, like blinking, like breathing, they happen in a way that is reflexive and aren't under control. And so they're actually really, really difficult to fake. So if I ask you to breathe, you will not make a natural breath, both in its volume or in its depth. If I ask you to smile, you'll not smile with the same cadence, speed, and symmetry as you would when it's a natural smile. And so it's true, yeah, absolutely. We make expressions as part of that affiliative bonding, but also we respond to things. And it's by using those naturalistic responses that you can use to build the learning algorithms. And so what TikTok is doing, which is really, really clever in its algorithm, and I would really advise you to read a really fantastic article by someone called Eugene Wei called Seeing Like an Algorithm, which really breaks down the whole TikTok algorithm. But basically what they're doing is using the fact that they present you with something, and you swipe it away, and the speed at which you swipe it away, and the content within it, it tells it a little bit more about what you like. And Netflix did the same thing. Netflix, they moved from you having to voluntarily do an explicit action of pressing play to press that preview, to auto-playing it, and actually having to make a response of dismissing it. And that's a really key part of understanding behavior. Because if you change the default from being take action to reject versus take action to accept, you completely turn the whole thing on its head. And now you can increase the amount of data vastly.
So then the suggestion is that these sort of involuntary visual expressions are a type of behavior.
Exactly, yeah. So that's basically the distinction between implicit valence. Implicit valence means what comes naturally to you, and explicit valence, which is something that you do voluntarily, such as pressing a like, doing a rating, or giving a fake smile.
Thank you. Any other questions? Sophie, where you go? First, you.
Really wonderful stuff. You seem to be doing a great job with what we can notice from the EMG, from the face. It's definitely a cheap way to go about it, and I'm sure you noticed that whenever you made the large prototype and you said, okay, maybe this won't cost $1,000 in 10 years. But what are you doing to handle more complex emotions in emotion chains, such as micro expressions, and then what you see on the face, but then what the person really is feeling? If you were to ask them, or if you were to use other modalities, it would be something different. You're like, I did do a real smile, but 1.5 seconds later, I felt disgusted, but I may not have shown it on my face. By the way, I'm not disgusted by the talk. I'm impressed, and it's a great job. But I'm just saying, emotions are complex like that, and you can do quick hops to other emotions, and they may not be present on the face because it's maybe that's the involuntary gets shown, but the voluntary is less shown. How are y'all addressing more complex emotions?
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole hour's talk in itself. So the first thing to say is that, and this is one of the things that's been really fascinating about neuroscience research in the last couple of decades, especially with the work around split brains, is where a person has had, either through surgery or accident, their brain has been split in half, and so you're able to disambiguate what a person has experienced versus what they perceive of their experience as well. And people are not very good at understanding how they feel. In fact, what's been shown is that the timing between the experience, the response, and what you say about the response we are basically constantly having to make up stories about what we're doing. This is how we live our lives, and it feels like we're in control of things, it feels like that we're explaining stuff, but it isn't the case. In terms of complex models of emotions, surveillance is the key part. There are only two ways to interact with the world. One is doing nothing at all, i.e. didn't attend to it, positive to approach, or negative to go away from. You can go away from something in two ways. You can either just destroy it, so that it's no longer there, or you can withdraw from it. But that's broadly speaking. And everything else you talk about in terms of complex emotions can be mapped to those dimensions. So you mentioned disgust. Disgust is, in terms of valence, is negative. And then its other dimension is between self to other. So you experience disgust in relation to negative valence in relation to an other object. If that makes sense. Whereas anger would be negative valence towards another object. But you're going to go towards it to destroy it or remove it from your space. Whereas with disgust, you're going to either expel it from your body or remove it from your life, if that makes sense. So all these things can be modeled, but they're multidimensional. In terms of modalities to measure, so one of the things that we do is that we have these two platforms. We have the glasses-based platform, which is for real-world use, and the VR platform, which is basically a laboratory in a box, because we're measuring EMG and heart rate variability and breathing rate, which allows us to map very precisely and synchronize experience and response to that experience and build personalized models, and that's the key.
Thank you. Another question over here?
So I think it's related to the question this gentleman asked. How will this device detect subtle expressions? Because most of the expressions that we see, the photos of it, at least from this presentation, it's really obvious. So I'm just wondering how well does it detect those like really subtle?
It's super precise. I mean, it's sampling thousands of times a second, actually. It's not showing very well here because it's having to go through this process. But, I mean, maybe I can show you afterwards, but it's more accurate than the camera. So if you point a camera at my face, I can make expressions that are smaller than you could perceive, but are actually measurable using the technology.
Another question over here?
Thanks. This was really cool. So what about the extent of sensor to skin contact that's needed for this? Is it crucial for sensors to be touching with some force? And what about the level of various skin disturbances? What about if you're sweating? What about if you're wearing makeup? All of those things.
Yeah, so with electromyography, which is a contact-based system, that is definitely an issue. So because it's relying on the fact that the body is basically a salt water solution and you're taking the currents from the body and transmitting them through that conductive solution to the sensors, it can be affected by skin quality, by makeup, by sun lotion, et cetera, This technology actually is using optomyography, which is a new category of technology that hasn't really existed in the world before. And so it doesn't have to have contact with the body. It's glasses, and so it's fine.
Just a couple more questions.
Yeah, so you seem to, or like I think you implied that like when the person was sitting reading the book, that their expression could lead to turning up the lights. I mean, the domain of the things that I might want to do while I'm sitting reading a book far exceeds just turning up the lights, right? Turning up the music, calling a friend or something like that. Yeah. Are you implying that I would be able to make some sort of algorithm to make that decision that that person wants to engage with the light? Or is there any work that you've done in this area that like, how can you tell from the context of the enormous domain of the things that I want to do, what I want to do?
That's a really good question. I'm going to put it back onto you and say, if you wanted to turn on the music player, what would your first action be? Yeah, if your iPod or your music player was like just out of reach, what would you do? You'd probably look at it first, wouldn't you? And so you can think about how you'd have a stepwise approach whereby, if I want to dim the lights, it's too bright in here, I look at the lights and I squint, the lights come down. I want to turn the music up, I turn it, I smile, and the music turns up. You know, there are only two ways of interacting with the world, either positive approach or negative withdrawal. And so you can use that paradigm for all kinds of interactions, be it, let's say, simple things such as gestural control, take a picture, turn on the lights, turn on the music, open the door, This is how we interact with the world. When you smile at somebody, you're opening the door into an interaction.
Great, one more question here.
Yes, it's awesome work. Is this available for like development work with other companies? Do you guys have a cloud solution, or how does it work?
So we are launching the glasses as a development system for people doing, mostly it's going to be researchers, either doing mental health research, things like depression, bipolar disorder, etc. And for consumer research as well. That's going to be soon. Just email us and we'll let you know when that launch is. The platform will be launching at the end of Q1 of next year. That will allow sort of cloud-based analytics. At the moment, it's all sort of local, but to enable much more scalability, it's going to be all cloud-based.
Great. Thank you so much, all. This was just
Thank you.
terrific talk.
Thank you.